Hello and welcome back to In Conversation with Creatives. For episode 5, I have with me my senior from college and a friend who works in the research and insights domain, Mr. Rahul Suresh. He is a graduate from NIFT and MICA and has worked with brands like Madura Fashion and Lifestyle, Future Group, Cognizant, and currently works with a US-based retail corporation. So let's jump right in. Hello and welcome to the show, Rahul. It's really nice to see you here.
Thanks, Arun. Glad to be part of your show.
So one of the first questions that I've asked my other guests on the show, primarily because I don't know the answer to that question, but in your case, I actually do remember it. But do you remember the first time we met by any chance?
I think it was in the NIFT auditorium in one of the introductions to the new batch. I don't remember the name of the event, but yes, it was a new batch. Everyone was there, and I was invited to sort of speak on behalf of the alumni. So that's where you had asked me a question, and I think I remember from there.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is that you were not really in college when I came to college, and you just happened to come and do that alumni meet and stuff. And what's more interesting is that you sort of had like a pretty good influence over my life. Like I was doing some amount of design when I was in Delhi, and when I came to Bangalore, you're one of the people who opened the doors into freelance for me. So you gave me a lot of projects to work on and we did things together. And if you had not come for that meeting, I probably wouldn't have met you or have known you or like know that there's Rahul Suresh out there. So
one of the things that I remember about you is also when you asked me about freelance in your first day at college. I was like, okay, he has come to study, but then he means business. So I was glad to see that spirit in you, and I think that's where we clicked.
Yeah, nice, good that we clicked. But I'll move on from that. And also, before getting into research and insights and whatever you do today, what made you get into the creative fields? Where did you first find an inclination towards design and creative fields?
Yeah, so the story goes somewhat way back in my 8th standard or something, where my dad got me a digital camera when he visited Dubai and he was coming back for some business purposes. So I had asked him to get a handycam, but he said handycam. I went and looked out there. It wasn't the best thing there. It was a digital camera, and that was the first time I saw a digital camera, or anyone in my school had seen a digital camera.
Okay.
Digital camera really opened up the gates to Photoshop and all the editing that we can do digitally. And from there, I think I started making photo collages and videos and small little digital content, so to say, that sort of made me stand out in the school.
Okay.
And so one thing led to the other thing, and then finally when it came the time where I had to choose my higher studies, I told my dad that I want to do something in design and creative field. So he went and he researched, and he came back and said, okay, there are like a couple of colleges in India. If you make it to one of them, we wouldn't mind. And then I started preparations, and I got into NIFT.
Okay. That's a very similar story to what I also have. So what were you doing in school? Like what kind of movies and what kind of digital things were you creating back then?
So one of the first things that I remember is there was a teacher, Hindi teacher, class teacher of mine, who was leaving the school after 1 year of teaching us. And it was quite an emotional moment for me and for the class, and I thought we should do something about that. So I got the digital camera to the school, and those days it was allowed. I clicked some pictures of her and made a sort of mixed some music into it, used PowerPoint to create a slideshow, which was like an automatic thing. And luckily, the school also inaugurated a AV room, audiovisual room, which was like a dark lit room with a projector and some 5.1 surround sound. So I welcomed the teacher into that room, and then I played this in the AV room, which was quite dramatic, and she of course liked it. And my principal happened to see that, and what he did was he used that video as a means to communicate to other kids in the school that, see, audiovisual room is this, and you can utilize it for a lot of things. So that's where I started off. I started making some of these video montages for school programs, like there is a math fest or a cultural fest. There was this opening video that goes in. So those kind of things I started making, and that's how I got in.
Wow, man, that's really interesting. I wish we had gone to the same school. We could have done a lot of things together.
I think it was the time, right? Every kid, every school had a few kids like me and you, who sort of took this up and started experimenting.
Yeah, even we had like this AV room, and we had this group of kids who would do these things, and we called ourselves pyrotechs and stuff. It's like very.
It's funny because the group had to have a name and an identity, and for me it was VAC.
Okay.
And looking back, I kind of think I had a better name for it, because it was standing for the school's name, which was Vishwajyoti, and every smaller group had some sort of arts creations.
Okay.
So I created like Vishwajyoti Arts Creations, and it became VAC. So that's a funny story. But yeah, I think it gave us a lot of identity as to some of the work that we could do, and also became very technically sound in terms of both camera, video, and all of the equipment around it, but also on the software side, how to edit it, and maybe weaving together a narrative. So that was good.
Okay. So moving on from there, so you chose NIFT as your college, and what made you think of NIFT as the right choice to go to? And also, was there any resistance from your family, especially since NIFT stands for a fashion college, and being a guy, I think there will be more resistance to getting into a college like this. Did you face anything like that?
I think being a guy, if I had to put it, I didn't think that was the resistance. But the resistance was in terms of maybe choosing another field like engineering or medicine. Medicine, I think I had made a choice when I did my 11th, because I didn't take biology. Okay. But when it came to choosing the graduate course, there was some sort of influence, okay, whether you should go into design or not. But my parents supported me. I think they had a few set of colleges which they said, or they felt they were better. So NIFT being a government college, and they had heard about it, and some of the seniors from NIFT were my father's colleagues' children. So he kind of knew the college was decently reputed, and it's a place that offers a lot of opportunity. So I didn't face as much of resistance from my parents and my friends, and even the school. I think there was a lot of support in joining or taking a course that was not very usual engineering medicine stream of learning. But why I chose NIFT is a different question, because I didn't want to do fashion design, but at the same time, I wanted to get into communication design side of things. Mm-hmm. And NIFT had a course called, or it has a course called Fashion Communication. And it had, like, in the prospectus, it was written that the recruiters are MTV and some of the production companies and the TV media house channels. I think that was the place I wanted to be in, or at least go in that direction, where things seemed quite cool, and there was a lot of opportunity, I thought. As it happened, those weren't the doors that got opened, I would say. Although, if I had focused on it, definitely there are people in my batch who went into that area as well. But NIFT in Bangalore, especially, I think it opens more doors to the corporate field, which are in apparel or in some of the e-commerce side of businesses, because Bangalore being a place for that, I think that's where most of the NIFT students from Bangalore would go. And I think that was great influence on me as well.
Okay. So after doing NIFT, you sort of went into MICA. So at what point did you feel the need to do a postgraduate degree after you had completed your graduation?
So after NIFT, I worked for 2 years. So 1 year I worked with Indus League, or as it is called now, Future Lifestyle Fashions, where I did visual merchandising. When I was there, I saw the marketing team, the kind of work that they do. There were other brand managers, and the whole system around that office, which I felt like were better places suited for me than visual merchandising. It's nothing to do with the visual merchandising as a job role. I think it's fantastic. There is a lot of opportunity in there. For me personally, I felt like I had a better knack of doing content and understanding narratives and things like that. So marketing was something that I always aspired to be in. And when I was looking at opportunities to study further, MICA was one of the standout choices, because it was offering a mix of creativity as well as business, and I think that was a good fit for me, and luckily they felt so too, and I got in.
So after doing your NIFT, you went to MICA and you did a fashion communication course at NIFT, and then you went to Mudra Institute of Communications, Ahmedabad. So what do you feel are the differences between the two courses, or even the colleges, or how things are done at both the places?
Yes, certainly there is a difference. And when I was in NIFT, there was a faculty who was a MICA alumni who had come and taken a course about communication and its importance. I think I was inspired from that, and ever since I was looking forward to going for further education, and MICA was certainly one of the options I had. MICA, in a sense, takes the learning from NIFT further. So NIFT focuses on the creation of communication. So that means you're learning photography, you're learning graphic design, and there are multiple channels and means of creating communication or designing for communication. But what MICA teaches you is its role or its importance in business or in business organizations. So it tries to equip you with skills like market research, then evaluation of messaging and strategizing it, and thereafter what kind of communication would be better fit for what kind of market or business opportunities. So it's a very integrating or a pivotal role in a sense, where it is sort of bridging the gap between the creative professional as well as the objectives of a business organization. So I felt that was a great place to be, and MICA certainly is one of the few colleges in India which offers this specialization.
Oh man, that sounds really interesting, to a point that I feel like doing this course. Oh.
It's a very interesting course. At the same time, I would say you need to have the passion for that field, right? The advertising and the marketing field. It's not a general MBA sorts where you have like an MBA as a degree, but this is a little bit more on the side. Okay, MBA, but in communication. So there's this very specific kind of role or function that you're going to have in your future. So that's that's the way I see it. But MICA has evolved to a certain degree. They are moving more into the marketing domain and not just focusing on creative, is what I feel. But yeah, that's how it is.
Got it. So I'll just take a little detour for a second, and this is something that I was thinking about a few days back, that a lot of people I know who do take graduation degrees usually don't end up finding the right jobs or the right paying jobs, and then there's usually a need to do an MBA or a post-graduation degree. So that sort of made me question, is there even a need to do a graduation degree in the first place? Like, what's your take on something like that?
Yeah, so what I don't know if I'm qualified as a professional to speak about career choices, but I can only share my experience here. What I feel is from school to college, the transition is very drastic. So many a times with the academics, you sort of don't have much time to think about what to do next. So you either go with the flow, or you have heard something and you just chase that without knowing what's the end result of it. So there is a mismatch, oftentimes you start the course and you realize that maybe this is not what you wanted to do, or there isn't enough that you want to learn from this. One of the ways I felt this could be mitigated is by taking a break here or something like that. It's okay not to immediately go from 12 to a graduation degree. Then maybe take one more year to sort of figure out what you want to do. It's certainly better to be at the right place when you're graduating than starting with graduation and then finding yourself in a place where you don't seem to belong. In my case, I didn't feel so. I felt I was in the right place. And also from graduation, when you go into post graduation, I think there is definitely that academic pedigree definitely helps you, because you have a certain skill from a learning standpoint, and you further that with your post graduation. But in today's world, I think education is going through a very big change. It's getting getting really distributed from new platforms like Coursera or many of the new ones, even Khan Academy, which offers free courses. These are sort of making a big change in the society, where it is not required that you have to spend so much time or effort or money in many cases to learn a skill. What colleges offer you differently is the group, is the network. Also, it's the opportunity to learn from each other a little better. I think online platforms still can't compete in that sense. So just to learn a skill, I don't think graduation is as good. But if you're looking at building a very long-term career, in a very general sense, graduation would be useful, but there are exceptions as well.
Sure, I think that's a very valid point, and I'll sort of come back to what we were discussing before this. So, what made you choose consumer insights, and why research? What made you get into those things?
Yeah, so I would say that I didn't really choose consumer insights. It happened to me. I applied for a role when the campus interviews were happening, and from there it just took off. So if you were to ask me about the role, it's very difficult to answer, because it's just organic. It happened that way. But personally, I feel the curiosity to know and maybe having the resources to sort of explore it and understand more about consumers, I think that's something that I really enjoy, and that's how I got into the insights and research space.
Okay. Also, before we proceed any further, can you tell us what is consumer insights and how is it useful in today's world?
Yeah. So there are quite a lot of distinctions and definitions of consumer insights. So the one that I sort of like, and it has stayed with me, is understanding the unarticulated needs and wants of consumers. So unarticulated because the consumers themselves don't say that explicitly. So it's a layer beneath what they communicate. So you have to analyze many of consumers to understand why they are wanting to choose a certain kind of product or service. One of the examples is around the Liril soap. It's a very widely quoted example. The Liril ad, if you remember, it was a
Fresh, something to do with.
it was about freshness. It was about a lady who is taking bath in waterfalls, and it's really serene, and there's water, and suddenly the little soap comes in. So this is a legendary advertisement, and the consumer insight behind it, later on it was mentioned that they had studied a lot of Indian housewives, and when they studied them, they identified that the only time that they really have in their lives is when they finish the household chores, they send off their kids to school, maybe the husband also goes to work, and then they have their in-laws, or the whole household is there. So they have the bath in somewhere in the afternoon, and that is the only time that they feel really relaxed and really into themselves, right? So you capture this imagination where that person is really relieved, relaxed, and feels disconnected from the other world, like having so much chores. That emotion is being captured by Liril in that ad. So it's not coming randomly from a creative sort of enlightenment. It's coming very strategically, where they had identified an emotional need and sort of tapped into it. So that's how consumer insights work. It's not that one person says something, but then you try to answer it by asking a lot of whys and going behind it and understanding the root cause of what's the consumer really wanting from the product or service you want to provide them.
Okay. Do a lot of companies do this, or are they very select companies who do something like that? Because I find it hard to imagine that every company thinks so much about consumer insights before they do their marketing. Or like, even if they do, who's the one who proposes it? Is the CEO who comes and says, okay, go and do market research, or how does it really work?
I see, for most part, I think every company is trying to understand their consumers in one sense or the other. Now, there might be different tactics around it. So some companies might think that understanding the sales data is the best way to understand the consumer. So you sell a certain kind of say mobile phones, and you understand, okay, this is what market needs, and that's enough for them. Maybe their margins are in that area that they do not want to understand more, because there isn't much that they can do with that information. But then there are organizations which have sort of led the industry or the category in a certain sense, and once they are the leading ones, they don't know what is going to be the next demand from consumers. So in order to push the frontiers of what could be the next product that the consumers could need, there is no other way than understanding consumer insights or investing in consumer insights to know better. So those are the companies I think will be interested or have a dedicated and a focused consumer insights team.
Got it. Also, when you were talking about this, I just suddenly remembered that I think Apple is a company which goes against this completely, right? So they believe that consumers don't know what they need and that we will produce what's needed for them, and something around the lines of, if you ask consumers what they want, they'll say they want faster horses and not cars, something like that. There were memes and jokes around this. What's your take on that?
I think Apple is one of the companies which understands consumers really well. Whether they have a consumer insights team that does it or not, I still don't know. I'm assuming there are some really good professionals out there who's doing this well. But in order to understand the perspective of Apple, maybe we need to understand how they go about their solutioning. Because if you have an insight, say tomorrow's consumers are looking at phones without any connections or any connectivity, or they just want a completely free thing to move around. I think that is something you don't really get like that. You get the idea that what is the pain point. Pain point might be like, I want to plug in the mobile every day. That is a chore. I don't like that. Or while it is being charged, I can't really use it well. So then you take this further and I identify like how to go about this. So there are two ways to go about this also. So problem solving usually happens through hypothesis testing or through design thinking. It's not an either or kind of a thing, but somewhat distinct in their own ways. Hypothesis testing typically happens when you are learning from the past. So you are drawing a line from the past and you're saying like, okay, this is where the trajectory is. So I'm going to place the product in the line it is showing. Like, okay, cars were initially having certain speed, then the roads got better, so you have certain speed. Now that conditions are getting better, like you have AC and things like that, so you include AC. So you draw that line like from the past how it comes. But at the same time, when you take a category like mobile phones, then maybe that is not the right thing to do. Here the future is imagined, so it might be drastically different from past. So design thinking comes into play, where you are actually trying to imagine and create a certain future and then testing it whether that will work or not. So it's a deviation from the past. In many ways, iPhone as a product category wouldn't have come if there wasn't enough imagination and creativity in the company to think about what's the future. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really mean that they don't have consumer insights. It's about having the insight but thinking differently in terms of solution.
Got it. All right. So also, again, when I usually hear about research, there are two terms which I keep hearing, which is quantitative research and qualitative research. So can you explain this? And also, when how do you realize when is the right time to do which one? Like, how do you figure that out?
Yeah. So the easiest way to think about this is when you can measure a certain phenomena, or to put it simply, you can measure sales. You can measure maybe somebody's satisfaction with the product through certain score index that you might get from a survey that you run or something like that. So what happens is anything that you can measure will fall under quantitative research.
So things like, can you rate iPhone on scale of 1 to 10 is?
Yes. Okay. Yes. And then you also put in a competitor mobile phone in the same survey and try to see like how much is the difference. Okay. So you track this over time, you sort of understand your performance in the market. Okay. But what happens with qualitative research is, if say you have some feelings deep inside about using mobile phone, because we are using that as a category, say about privacy. Now, can you rate how secure you feel about using a certain kind of phone? maybe you can, but it doesn't really give you that much of clarity into what it means. So qualitative research is typically that space where you are trying to understand a certain abstract idea of some sort of mindset that the consumers are. So it could be about, say, a family is using a certain kind of toothpaste, and they're saying, I don't like the taste of it. Okay, you understood you don't like the taste of it. 3 out of 4 in the family doesn't like the taste of the toothpaste. But then what is it about the taste that you don't like? That I think only a qualitative survey can, or qualitative research can provide.
Okay. All right. So even if you go back to that privacy thing, if people are not using iCloud, to understand why they are not using it is probably when you go into qualitative, right?
Yeah. Many ways, it's easier to say the what using quant and the why using qual. So the best research, in my opinion, will have some aspects of quant as well as some aspects of qual sort of blend in together, because that defines the understanding about consumers the best.
Okay. So now that we are anyways talking about this, so I understand that, quantitative research can be done through surveys, Google Forms and all those things you can send to people. And especially now with COVID and all those things happening, qualitative research is harder to do, I feel. So how do you tackle that? Like, I think qualitative used to be done on a one-to-one meetings, things like that, right? Interview sessions. Has that moved to Skype and Zoom calls now, or how has that changed?
So you can do qualitative remotely as well. So there are platforms that enable you to do that. I think even before the pandemic, we used to do qualitative mostly through remote means.
Okay.
But there is definitely merit in doing qualitative by going into the field as well. That is certainly something that we aren't able to do as much, probably. So yeah, there are means to do this, but
it's not a must do or something. You can do it remotely.
It depends upon the skill of the researcher.
Okay.
Some researchers are skilled in remote research, some are skilled in more in-field research. So that's definitely dependent upon the researcher.
Okay.
Overall, if you ask me, remote research provides a scale. So you can really have a larger number of participants in your research, but the depth or the quality of the output may be slightly lesser than the in-field research. So it's a trade-off, like which one to choose.
Also, going off slightly in a tangent, do you think a background in psychology would probably help you become a better researcher?
Absolutely. I think consumer research has a lot to do with psychology. The field of consumer research sort of evolved from many of the psychologists who were working in advertising. So James Walter Thompson, that is JWT, as it is known today, he was a psychologist and he opened up the advertising field, so to say. So things that psychologists might have intuitively or through their clinical experience gained, they go into the science resources or scientific tools to sort of validate them and make it into a theory or a rigorous kind of a model that can be replicated again. Okay. I don't know if I have clearly communicated that, but the idea is that clinically you might find, okay, certain behavior is coming when you ask a certain question, but then you use scientific tools to sort of take it to scale and measure it with accuracy and say that, okay, this is a thing that we should follow. One of the examples I can give is about Net Promoter Score, which is called as NPS today.
Okay.
So NPS is a very simple format. It just asks how many of your friends or acquaintances will you recommend this product in a rating scale of 10.
Okay.
So everybody rates it like maybe 5, 6, 7, whatever it is. And then all the other companies and everyone sort of tries to do the same thing. So you have then a score that is so standardized that you can compare one with the other and say that the experience as a whole can be measured using NPS. That comes because somebody had identified that when you ask this question, how many in a scale of 10, how much would you recommend this product? The idea of recommendation standing out as a substitute for experience is an identified principle that was later on taken.
Got it. So also, how does this research really translate into pixels or design? So I remember you had told me about the Liril ad and stuff, that how that consumer insight shaped that final ad. Can you give us any other example of how research translates into products that we use or ads that we see or a UI design that we see in today's world?
I think everything that you use will have some sort of insight that comes in. So that's how new products and services gets created. Let me think about an example that might be familiar. Let's say Colgate as an example, the toothpaste. Colgate wasn't doing well. I don't really know if it is a myth or an actual thing, but I found it somewhere in a blog or something, and I felt that was a really good insight. So if you remember back in the days in 90s and all, you had the Colgate powder, right? The white powder. So people used that, and then Colgate introduced the toothpaste. But what happened was toothpaste wasn't selling like really well. It was selling once in a month, or maybe even much lesser, like once in 3 or 4 months one household will buy a toothpaste. Compare that with the other markets where toothpaste was much more of a staple. Like they bought it like nothing. It's just like every month you buy a new toothpaste. So Colgate identified this, and they were like, okay, maybe the Indian consumers aren't using as much toothpaste as they should be using. So what to do with this, right? So they ran an employee contest, like, well, you come up with the ideas for solving this. So one of the employees came up with the idea that you take a toothbrush and take Colgate toothpaste, and then take the entire length of that brush with this squeezing part and do this very nicely and put an ad. So then people know, or you educate the people to say that, see, toothpaste has to be taken like the whole thing. You don't like take one end of it and use it like for the entire of your tooth set. So that was an insight that the market didn't really know how to go about it or how to use it, or even if it is right or wrong, the market doesn't understand. The market will look at the ads and see that is the right thing to do, and they use it. So definitely I think if it is a myth, then it's a great myth.
But it's a great example on how, like, I can totally relate to it. Like, people don't know how much toothpaste to use, and seeing that people would use more toothpaste, I think totally possible that something like that happens.
Yes.
Also, can you explain the difference between user research and market research, and what are the similarities between them, and how can we differentiate one from the other?
Yeah, so I would say market research is a little bit of a broader term that is used, because it would include your competition research. It could understanding the competitors in what kind of market you're playing. It could also include consumer research. So uh, all things related to consumers and their lives. It could also sometimes relate to the trends and what's happening in the industry, all of that, right? So it's a mix of a lot of things that market research stands for. When it comes to user research, it is a little bit more narrow uh, in terms of focusing on the user itself, like, right? So user in this case is a term that is coined more by the technology products that we use. And the best way to identify this is when you're using an app and the app wants to know how the experience is. That is a domain I think user research solves.
Okay.
Whereas you go into physical products and into, almost into the lives of people to understand where your product or service can fit, that is consumer research. So yeah, market research, consumer research, and user research as a subset of that.
Okay, got it. Also, one of the very overused terminology or phrases in today's world is designing for users. So, just want to ask you, how does one really go about designing for users, and what mind shift can one probably have to improve users' experience?
Yeah, designing for users is, from a literal standpoint, that is what it is, designing for users. But then you can break it down by who your users are. And your users, all of them can't be generalized. So you sort of segment the users further. And you understand, okay, there is a user who likes a certain aspect of your app or product more, whereas the other kind of users like a different aspect of your product, and they might use the same thing in a different way also. Maybe we are all familiar with um, many of the softwares. Like somebody who is searching for some visuals, they might start with Google search. Some users who are a little bit more advanced will go to google.image search, like the first go. So there are like multiple shades in which users come. So each type of user can be identified. It can be separately studied and designed for. When so the first aspect is the user itself. So the user can be identified, studied, and really understood very in much more detail. The second aspect is about designing for them. So what it means, at least from what I feel, is um, when you are really solving for a user, you need to understand the users from their perspective, not in a very sympathetic perspective, but from an empathetic perspective. I know it's a very used term out there, but really that is the way you can understand and design for users, when you can come out of your own uh, yourself and put yourself in their shoes, because the study about the user would have that much clarity. Then you start thinking in the ways that they would use the product. If you are making a product for India, you have to think in a very desi manner, if so to say. Like you have to think about them in their language, in the nuances, cultural nuances that they exist in, the familiarity with the technology products that they have, and then simplify your product to that extent that the user is able to uh, leverage that product to the best for their interest.
I think that's
The
very
other
interesting. Yeah, go on.
the other way to think about it is also a little bit from a psychological perspective, right? Users may want a certain thing, but they are not clearly able to explain it. So even if you empathize with them, you can't be really direct about it. You need to be a little bit more, uh, for the sake of sounding a little bit prophetic, but have the vision for what their own future could look like, right? So maybe the user is not saying that I want to have a better phone which has like crazy assistant, like Siri or something. They would ask like, can my mobile play uh, radio? But you can take that further and use that technology, or use the possibilities of technology and further solve the problem. So the problem can be at the center, but user what they are asking, I think it should not be taken at a literal sense.
Okay. I think what you spoke was really valid. Like, especially in terms of like a lot of designers, what I see them do is they pick up a product which is there in the US and try to replicate the same UI and use it in Indian market. So I think what you spoke about, realizing that your customer is Indian, so design for that person. I think that really made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I would also want to maybe add a little color to that thought about using a product that is used somewhere else, and sort of repurposing it in India. Peter Thiel in his book sort of argues like 0 to 1 is the toughest part of a product, and after that you have that advantage of just adapting it to different situations. If I'm not quoting him wrong, that's but I think that is the crux of what he was saying, and that is a very valid thing. For India, you might not need to reinvent some of the products. Like, it might be about repurposing, repackaging it. So there is definitely a need or a valid reason for taking inspiration from markets which are developed and might be a little bit more evolved, even though it might feel like we are completely different beings. But I think from a global perspective, it only makes sense to see all humans moving in somewhat similar space, and then adapting it to the cultural nuances, or the environment a little better.
Okay. So I think moving on from that to a very similar topic was that I see a lot of brands and companies going for that minimal look these days, and more designers also want to stick to that. And while there's a good argument from the user experience side that it helps ease of navigation and people know what to expect where, doesn't that hamper differentiation for products in a certain light?
Yes, it's a dilemma, I would say, many of the brands might be facing in certain sense. Even I have thought about it, like maybe if we are going into this future where it's unity, like right, you have everything just
Exactly
right
the same.
for service, exactly the same. It definitely brings in the efficiencies in the system, and it sort of gives you a perspective into the future where everything is meaningful and purposeful, in that sense. So what is brand's role in that? Nobody knows for sure what is going to happen, I think. But what I feel is it's important to distinguish between what a minimal look is and what a functionally right product is. So minimal look is an aesthetic. I think it's a trend. It can come again. It can morph into something else. So it right now it might be the trend because that sort of aesthetic also matches the industrial era where you're trying to produce one thing for everyone, and sort of that becomes one push. It started with the Second World War time period where Germany was sort of focusing on creating a housing unit that could work for everyone, so that it worked at scale. Whereas the functional product side is a more of a industrial term, right? It has a purpose for it which you can't really deny. You can't really change the purpose of it. For example, maybe brushing teeth is because we have used toothpaste as an example. I'm saying that is a area where the body is in certain way. You are doing the act of cleaning your tooth is also going to remain. So there isn't going to be much of a difference in that area. Whereas something else might have a lot of changes, because say our mobility. So today we are moving in cars and buses. Tomorrow we might have like personal aeroplanes. So there is a lot of room for growth. So functionally making a very distinct car might make some sense there, because at the second layer of that functionality is still available. Whereas for a toothpaste or something which has reached its peak in terms of functionality, then the only way to differentiate is by doing brand positioning or something like that. And the brand positioning is also working in a certain psychology principle. So if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there is this basic need, safety, love and emotion. Then you have the
self-actualization.
The topmost is self-actualization and all of that. So it definitely is a principle to think when a brand is trying to play into it. All human beings won't be equal, even though that is the principle that we want to believe in. Like even the US Constitution would say that all humans are born equal. They are not saying that they will die equal, because there is a sense of movement or social mobility that you want to create, and brands need to identify which of those social space or domains that you want to play into, what are their needs, and sort of use that as a marker for your brand.
Okay. No, man, that's especially that line, all people are born equal, and not die equal. I think that's very interesting to hear. I think that's true also. Also, moving on from there, I think a lot of people who are watching this might be aspirants who want to get into the research fields. So how does one get started in a field like this for research and insights?
Well, first you need to identify that you have a passion for it. I think it's for all professions, so this is nothing different. But in case you have identified that this is the place that you want to be, I think there is a lot of merit in getting an actual learning course for it, either through a degree or a college degree, or a degree, definitely a college degree, but through other means also. For example, if you want to do a certificate course in it or something like that, just focusing some time to get these concepts at a very fundamental level. Experience definitely helps once you go into the field and you do the interviews and you do a lot of actual field work. I think that there is a lot of merit in it. And then you progress into a role where you sort of strategize about how to design a research for a particular business problem. So to get into the field, the easiest way would be to get into one of the colleges that provides this as a specialization. The other way, which might be a little bit more easier path to it, could be doing an online certificate program which focuses on consumer insights. I think that also helps. From design to consumer insights, I think for a person who is working in UX design role has an easier route, because UX design in some ways also includes UX research. And many organizations, as they evolve, they spin a UX design team into a subset like UX research, which only focuses on research. So you get into UX research and then you get into consumer insights domain. So that is a path that you can sort of explore within your organization as well.
So if somebody is, say, currently doing a design role or a UX role, at what point should they consider switching to a research role? Or is that something that happens naturally over time?
I think it's very personal to each person, like how they would think about it. If you want to focus your skill building in solutioning, right? Like really be imaginative, be creative in terms of what solution you can provide, which is a different skill altogether than thinking about how to understand a consumer or a user better, which is a different skill in itself. It's not solutioning, it's learning, it's identifying, it's articulating that need. So they are two different things. So personally, once you are in a role where you know, okay, I like this phase of design where I'm really spending time with the users, whereas somebody else might I like this phase of design where I'm on the artboard trying to create a mock-up of the app or something. So it's just that personal reflection that might help.
Okay, got it. Also, there are two ways that a consumer insight professional could probably work. One is at an agency side and one is at the brand side. Which one do you think is a better route, or what's your take on where should one work?
Yeah, so I am not really qualified to compare it because I haven't worked in an agency before. But there are certain aspects of it which I can maybe provide a little bit more information about. From a brand perspective, I think they are more focused on the business objectives. There is a whole lot of organizational requirements that you fit in that context, right? So it's a lot of work in terms of connecting the dots between different departments. It could be presenting it to leadership and trying to get the buy-in. So apart from research itself, you have a lot of other things to sort of figure out and make it work. Whereas in a agency, I would say they have a little bit more liberty to focus on research itself, and they become sort of specialists in that domain. And there is more growth in terms of a specialist than I would say in a brand. So that's a difference that I think it might help.
Got it. Okay, so I think I'll move on to the last question that I had for you, which is, if you were to go back and give some piece of advice to a younger Rahul Suresh, what would that probably be? Maybe a 18, 19-year-old. What would you say to him?
I don't know, to be honest, because the way it has sort of panned out, I felt it was just right for me. What I have realized is that I have sort of drifted along the career, right? I've seen one place like maybe design, and then a little bit more into digital side of things and some education, and then got into a company, and then moved roles within it. If I were in 1920 position, maybe I would have opened my thoughts a little bit more and identified the space that I am right now initially itself, so that I could have focused my career the way it panned out eventually. But that I can say because in the hindsight, I can I can sort of figure that out. But if I were, because at that point I didn't know this is a thing that I would be really interested in, and I stopped myself from thinking more broad. I was looking at design and looking at the course and sort of thinking about just trying to make a career out of the course that I have access to. So it's always good to think about a 5 years, 10 years timeline, like what you want to really do and work towards it.
Got it. So that was really nice talking to you, man. Like, thanks for taking out the time to do this. If somebody wants to reach out to you or get in touch with you, how can they probably do that? LinkedIn would be best.
LinkedIn would be best, and yeah, they can reach out to you, and you can always direct them to me.
So I'll put Rahul's LinkedIn URL in the description below, and you guys can check it out. And thanks again, Rahul, for doing this. It was really fun having you on the show. And I hope maybe sometime in the future we can do another episode or maybe something else like this.
Thanks, Arun. Thanks for the opportunity. And frankly, I enjoyed having this conversation. Very few times you get this opportunity to see, sort of explore yourself from a very different lens. So glad to be part of this. My first podcast as well, so I'm quite excited.
Okay. Thank you.